Hey everybody, I hope you don't mind that I'm in a little different setting than normal, but today is a little different too because I want to talk about something that's a little tricky in Jesus' Sermon on the Mount. In fact, it's something I believe is often some of the most misused or misunderstood words of Jesus. And it happens because as human beings, we do a lot of judging, whether we like it or not. I mean, we have to do evaluating and analyzing on a regular basis. You go to the grocery store, you go to pick out some fruit, you have to check which strawberries are going to last the longest, which ones already have some mold growing, there are bruises, they need to stay, and the ones that look freshest are the one you got to bring home, right? When you pick what college you're going to do, when you look at what job you should pursue, you have to do some judgment, some evaluating. In fact, we do this all the time. One of my favorite games to play with some of the kids in the youth group and stuff is like we call it super fight, and it's like, okay, who would win in these ridiculous battles that could take place? And you just throw out these different things, and you've got to judge based on what you know about them how they're going to be able to perform or not perform. It gets rougher though when we apply those skills to people. Because some of you might be a little thrown off and judging because I'm in a different place than our normal sanctuary setting. Some of you are freaking out because I have a T-shirt on, and maybe even more so, that's a Boy Scout scouting T-shirt, and you've got feelings about those things, and so that judgment is getting placed onto me just by being in this video this way. When we look at people and apply the skills we use to judge our fruit or our jobs or our things, uh, we apply past knowledge is basically what we're doing. And then we end up with this judgment on them based on what we see, based on what we've noticed about their behaviors and those sorts of things. And so we might judge them based on how we know they voted in the last election. We might judge them based on what music they like or don't like. We might judge them on their spending habits when we go to the grocery store and we see them spending all of this money on something and then wondering when we see what they drive if it really matches up really well, something like that. Sometimes we judge people based on the clothing that they wear. I had this happen to me in a credentials meeting for when I was starting out in pastoring. We have to go to these credentials interviews. It's kind of like your internship and you're a doctor. You're serving, but you're being overseen pretty regularly. And I had to go for these interviews, and I went in the middle of my work day. I happened to be working where the interviews were taking place. I was working in maintenance. So I stopped what I was doing. I cleaned myself up as best I could. I went and put on a new shirt so I would be somewhat presentable. And I went to the meeting, and the meeting went well, except I got a note to meet with my pastor a couple days later, and he said he had agreed to meet with me because the group that I met with, because of the fact that I wasn't in a suit, wondered if I was taking it seriously. You've probably been on the other side of a lot of those judgments, and it stings and it burns and it hurts our feelings. And a lot of times we're justified in feeling like we should push back on it. And we might toss out things like only God can judge me. And yet we have to have some sort of judgment, some sort of evaluating in order to make the best choices, in order to make the wise choices in our life. Choices that matter a lot more than what strawberries do I pick, are choices like who do I want my friends to be? What kind of person should I look for in a spouse? Jesus shared about judging people in Matthew chapter 7. And the advice that he gives, which is more than advice, it's really a command. He puts it in a way that is different than you might expect. He does it in a way that seems almost contradictory. And so we tend to pick the part that he spoke that we like the best, or at least the part that fits what we're trying to do in that moment, instead of listening to both parts and trying to see how do they work together to truly give us the idea about what Jesus is trying to say. So this is what he says in Matthew chapter 7, starting at verse 1. It says, "Do not judge, or you too will be judged. For in the same way you judge others, you will be judged, and with the measures you use, it will be measured to you. Why do you look at the speck of sawdust in your brother's eye and pay no attention to the plank in your own eye? How can you say to your brother, let me take the speck out of your eye when all the time there's a plank in your own eye? You hypocrite. First take the plank out of your own eye, and then you will see clearly to remove the speck from your brother's eye. Do not give dogs what is sacred. Do not throw your pearls to pigs. If you do, they may trample them under their feet and turn and tear you to pieces. So, like unforgiveness, which we've talked about before, judging other people is dangerous because we get to be judged by the standard we use to judge others. The problem with our judgment is that it is always based on our perspective, which means our judgment is limited. We don't give people the benefit of the doubt. We trust our own senses. We trust our own expectations about what we think people should and should not be doing, especially in terms of how they relate to us. And so we don't need to worry about the ignorance of our own lives. We just jump to conclusions about other people's lives. All we need to know is that the actions that we see are things that we process by how they affect us. And so a lot of times we end up in places where we're making these judgments based on our limited perspective. For example, a lot of times you'll hear people tell stories about what would happen if somebody broke into your home. Wouldn't you arrest them, shoot them, all these different things? Well, this happened to someone I know. They weren't the ones who had their house broken into. They were someone who broke in to someone's house. Their story was that they had been in a relationship that was incredibly abusive, like would go days without having food to eat, was regularly beaten and assaulted. And one day, their abuser just left enough of a crack that they could escape out of that house and run. And they ran as far and as fast as they could to find some open door somewhere in somebody's home that they could go in and ask for help. So they came into somebody's house. That person wasn't home, so they came in, they locked up the doors behind them, and they went in the kitchen and they ate for the first time in days. And they just sat on the floor, hiding in the kitchen, waiting for someone to come because they believed they would be able to help them. How would you feel about that person coming into your house? How do you feel knowing that a lot of the times the judgments that we make are not ready because we don't have the full story or the full picture? And if that's true, how safe do you feel knowing that if you're the one doing those kinds of judgments, then you will be judged by that same standard? One of the problems is our judging often comes from a hypocritical perspective. Hypocrisy literally means that we're putting up a mask because we don't want people to see what is underneath it. Jesus paints this ridiculous picture because he doesn't bless who we pretend to be. He only blesses who we really are. And so he wants this picture of this plank sticking out of somebody's eye, like way out here versus a little speck, because he wants us to realize how ridiculous we really look when we're acting like this. When we judge others' struggles while seeming oblivious to our own, either because we've put up the mask for others or even for ourselves, we end up in this predicament where we are going through life ridiculously knocking into people, always causing pain, always causing harm, while still pointing out the things that are wrong in other people. One form of this is projection, where we're annoyed by other people when they do the very same things we probably don't like about ourselves. And sometimes when we're so busy hunting for faults in others, it's because we don't want to take the time to actually look on our own. Every once in a while, someone will come up to me and say, "Hey, why don't you preach about sin harder?" I'm like, "I'd be happy to. Which one do you need me to preach about?" And that always ends the conversation because it's never their sin that they want me to preach harder about. It's somebody else's sin that they pointed out and seen. You see, they want to focus over there instead of on what they've got to deal with. And it is the opposite of the prayer of David, search me, O God, and know my heart. We don't want our hearts to be known. We just want everybody else's to be figured out. When we do not know ourselves, we're lost. And then there are other times when we know ourselves, we know our sin, we know our struggles, we know what the problem is, but we don't like the uncomfortableness of it. Because when we are in that place, we either going to have conviction, which is God's Holy Spirit trying to move us to a place where we break free of it, or we're going to feel shame, which is the enemy of our soul trying to get us to go deeper into it because we feel stuck. And because we don't like dealing with those two feelings, we'd rather put the attention on somebody else. So we will distract with bluster about what somebody else is doing and what about isms and things like that. And instead of feeling ashamed of for ourselves, we just want to be able to point at somebody else and say, you should be ashamed. This is the kind of judging that Jesus does not have time for. Because the bottom line about it is when we have this mask up that it looks like a plank sticking out of our eye, we carry a distorted vision of ourselves and a distorted vision of others. And we leave it there because we're scared of being revealed for who we really are. Or maybe we're scared because we feel stuck and we don't know what our life is like if that's not there. And for some of us, if we're honest, we're not ready to get rid of it yet because we're enjoying it. There's some pleasure in judging others and feeling superior and being able to look down on someone else and say, I'm better than you. But when we're doing all of those things, we are judging people rashly, we're judging people blindly. And if we want to live the life that Jesus has called us to, then the plank has got to go. And so we have to be real and take the mask down and quit hiding about what's really going on. So we have to be real about ourselves, about who you are without the mask. Honest about your own struggles with yourself, with God, and probably with somebody else too, because we need each other. That's how we're designed. The practical thing is we try to impress people with our strengths, but we'll connect with people through our weaknesses because then people don't feel alone and it earns trust when you're not putting up this wall or bravado and you let people know who you really are. Now, it's hard because it means we've got to be vulnerable. And vulnerability means that someone might take advantage of us. Vulnerability means there's places where we're tender and soft, but it's those places where we'll be most connected to others. We also have to be real about other people. Like, I don't know everything about you. I don't know everything that's going on in your life. I don't know everything that you have, you're dealing with. And so I have to give you the benefit of the doubt when you act in ways that don't meet my expectations. It might mean that I have to connect with you on a deeper level so I actually know what's going on inside of your head and in your life, that I actually care enough to learn about it. And I seek answers instead of just trying to make up my own. And I have to be real about God, that He knows so much more than I do. So I should let Him handle the judgments, especially judgments about who's in and out of His kingdom. And I have to realize that He is really good at removing not just little specks out of people's eyes, planks. Maybe I need to ask Him to help me with the things that I'm struggling with and deal with that first before I go looking what everyone else has got going on. When I do this, I actually lead myself into maturity as I follow what the Spirit already wants to do in my life and make me more like Christ. And it leads me to be more compassionate to other people around me. So instead of judging them and being harsh and being quick to tell them who they are and what they're doing, I open myself up to learn about them, to travel with them, and to be compassionate to what they're going through. A couple of years ago, I just gave up caffeine for Lent, and it was rough. Like the mornings were not really mornings, but the afternoons were really hard. Sometimes I start to get a little bit of headaches. I'm like, I've been on this just a little too long, and it was hard to just make it a few weeks with that. And when I got to the end of that, it made me realize how much harder is it for those people that are dealing with significant addictions in their lives. Changed my judgment of them. But even though I'm not to judge others in this rash, harsh, incomplete way, That doesn't mean that I get to go through life without discernment. Not every choice is equal. Sin is real. And that's why we don't just give things that are really valuable to dogs. We don't toss pearls to swine, like Jesus said. We have to be smart about what we share with others. The vulnerability that we give needs to be in a place that's safe. The value that we have, we need to trust to people we can trust and not just anybody. So there is a sense where I still have to pay attention to those things, even as I'm not judging people harshly or calling them out in ways they shouldn't be called out. This will happen more when you deal with your own struggles. This will happen more when you realize that we work together and we work through things together and we're traveling towards Christ together on this journey of grace than it will if you think I'm by myself. I've got to figure it all out by myself and look at all these people who are either so much better than me or so much worse than me. No, no. We are in this together. You see, the goal isn't to be better or worse than somebody else. The goal isn't to be able to look down somebody's nose that you've judged as inferior to you. The goal isn't harsh punishment. The goal is healing. The goal is living in the truth of what's actually happening in your life, what's actually happening in other people's life, and what God is actually doing in the midst of it all, so that together we can grow in grace. Because whether you think you're at the top or the bottom, grace is something we all need. Practically, this can apply even to our local church here. It's been kind of a hard year. If you felt that, you've been correct. It's shown up in giving patterns and serving patterns and attendance patterns, all of the patterns. And it's easy to judge out of those actions that you see and think, oh, that person's falling away from the faith. This person's not taking uh, being a part of the church seriously, et cetera, et cetera. But there are some things that you might not know in the midst of that judgment. For example, we have roughly 15, we'll make it 15 as a nice even number. So 15 families that are regularly a part of our church. If you took those 15 families, this is what you would need to know. 24, which means there's more than one per family. 24 have suffered a significant loss of a loved one, of a job, of housing, or of income. 8 have had significant health issues in their family. 7 have had to provide care for family members that has disrupted all kinds of patterns in their lives. 10 have had trauma level experiences, and another 8 have had high stress life changes. If you add that all up and divide it by 15, that means that every family has had nearly 4 stress events, many of them chronic, which if you were coming to me, I would say off of the scale of what you've got, that you need to seek professional help because the stress level of what you're dealing with is so high. Now, if that's what people are dealing with that you don't even know, how could you judge? Who are you to say that their giving or attendance patterns are or aren't what they should be? Instead, maybe what we could do is find ways to make their place safe for them to be able to share that. So instead of tossing their pearls to swine, they're laying this vulnerable, hurting heart that they're carrying around, this incredible weight that is weighing them down, and they are able to place it with the people of God, that we might carry it together. That instead of worrying about the plank and keeping people at a distance, which is another thing a plank does, we put the plank down so that others can come and embrace us. And that together we can connect over the places that we're hurting and be able to say to all these people who feel it from time to time, you are not alone and you are not hopeless or helpless because Christ is with you and with me. And there will be times if we're willing to not judge each other, but be truthful and real with each other, that the grace of God will show up in such a way that nothing will ever be the same. Heavenly Father, I pray that you would help us be the kind of people that instead of looking at each other down our noses or even up, thinking they're out of reach, we will see each other as your children. And the hurts and pains that we carry would be ones that we would be willing to show each other. And the struggles we have won't be the ones we hide away in secret so that they consume us, but will be the ones we bring out into the open so that together we can seek your grace and walk in the life you've called us to as one. Meet us where we are and lead us to you. Amen.